industry. So we have a member from the resort, from Andel Inn, from the short-term rental program, etc. And we have also a representative from the Arts Council and community members. So they receive applications from themselves and from others to be funded by our restricted CETEX funds. The amounts that different individuals, companies, etc., have put forward, you see in the first column under tab number 2. Just for your information, whenever you see Town of Kiowa Island, it only represents 70% of the total cost for the project. These topics are presented to the CETEX committee. By the way, neither the CETEX committee nor the applicants know the total amount of funds available when they put in their applications. So they only learned about that when we forwarded them the documents early April. The procedure is in the meeting that the different applicants actually present their applications. There are question and answers, there are discussions, there are concerns, etc. voiced. But it goes one by one through the schedule. And then at the end, everybody except for staff members and myself as the current chair of the CETEX committee is allowed to vote, and the voting is by putting in an amount that each individual thinks is the right amount for that particular application, and then we're averaging it out. The applicant itself is not allowed to vote, so to speak. So, for example, as it relates to Andel Inn, everybody can put in the appropriate number except the representative of Andel Inn. Okay? There are differences in columns, and I want to give you a brief update on this as well. So under number 5, destination marketing, Andel Inn, the difference is significant. Probably the lower recommendation from the CETEX committee was also related to the lower contribution of the Andel Inn to the overall funding, was my sense of the matter. There's a little bit of difference for Acres Airless. That maybe has to do with competition. There's a little bit less as it relates to Garden and Gun. They now want to do a second of those events in Freshfields. And then a little bit of a difference as it relates to the advanced medical support, which is basically covering additional wages for those firemen that receive additional applications for medical services. And the last bullet point was postponed because the committee members felt like we want to first see what the final outcome of negotiations with the county is about. So can I please have a motion to approve the CETEX committee recommendation for funding of those different projects as outlined in the last column?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
I have a number of discussion items.
Please.
I'm sorry, Luke, for butting in, but because I wanted to set some ground rules for all of these items that we're going to be discussing. When you go into the CETEX book that we all received, tab number 3 talks about the policy for interpretation of these funds. And I'm asking this because item number 2 on no page numbers, it's the second page. It says the expenditure cannot be used for an item that would normally be provided by the county or municipality. Not sure how we meet that requirement, but then authorize monies for the sheriff's deputies. That's something that would normally be provided. And I want to have a discussion because I want to make sure we're not doing something in violation of the law.
So if you go on the same page a little bit further down, Russ, to the paragraph that starts with "in addition."
I see it.
Okay, that basically is also my interpretation and has been the interpretation in the past that in our case, for our municipality, because we have a substantial amount of tourism, that we are actually allowed to use these funds if tourism benefits from it. both either because it brings more tourism and guests and overnight stays to the island, or the services that we are funding actually benefit the tourists that are coming to the island.
All right, so thank you for that definition. I'm okay with that, but I just
And
wanted,
Russell, just to add on to that.
Yes, ma'am.
When we as a town put in our application, as was already discussed, we do look at tourism because we're saying essentially we're paying for this enhanced services. So over the years, what we do is we do reach out to Kika and other entities on the island to really specifically look at the tourism aspect of it. So based on our contract, we never request 100%. What we do is essentially for the last couple of years, the ROTA essentially creates like a formula to determine how much we'll apply for. And so we've come up with 70% of the costs, we can relate it back to tourism. So we get with Kika, we get in terms of the number of guest passes or visitors passes that's issued. We'll talk to the various entities on the island to see what their occupancy number is. So Dorota may want to add more into this, but we do all of that to then be able to say out of the cost, we can justify 70% of that cost could be tourism related. Yes, it's probably a little bit of we may be just kind of not really to the science, but we really feel that if it was challenged at Turk, if anyone challenged it, we would have justification to
well, that's a
show
great answer.
70%.
So you have an empirical way to substantiate the mathematics, so that's great, okay.
I mean, I would put that in quotation mark, but I think that's had been the practice. It has also been checked with the South Carolina state authorities, whoever has the oversight for SATAX, and they never had an issue with it.
Have we asked MAC or previous council?
So there's a couple things we'll probably have council look at with regard to SATAX-related funding. This one issue that's come up on repeated occurrences is the use of funding behind the gate. And so that probably requires some further thought going forward. 'Cause we had a very brief conversation with him. He says, well,
You and MAC, I'm sorry.
yes.
You said we, okay.
Sorry, but it was, literally, it was like a 1-minute conversation, and it was, the gist of it was, almost all the town's expenditures are directed behind the gate in some form or fashion. All our zoning standards apply behind the gate. A lot of our other functions and enforcement applies behind the gate. So the distinction between something that is physical versus intangible being expended behind the gate, it's not clear that there is a legal distinction for purposes of how ATAX funds could be used. But Mr. Chairman, if I could just back up on one thing, I wasn't, where does this?
Hold on one second.
I'm
So
sorry.
is your questions and concerns answered?
Yeah, it actually is. So I like the answer. I like the fact that we have an empirical way of backing it up. The only comment or request I would have is let's touch base with MAC if we haven't already to make sure we're okay.
Well, and somewhat related to that as well, the 70%. I mean, I think that's a topic that will come up, not specifically with regard to the state ATAX funds and the allocation, but when we, in strategic planning session, where we talk about gathering more data, to supplement and make sure that we're on the same page with regard to, do we really have all the data inputs we need to make decisions like
Understood.
that as to the
Okay.
70-30?
Well,
That was a
to
question
answer
I was
that-
gonna, can I follow up on that? Because I was gonna,
One-
for you, Stephanie. Do we get
you
numbers?
speak in the mic,
Do we
please?
get numbers for how many guests come in to the hotel? How many guests come in? Did we
We get
rent?
information, we don't make that public, but when we get the information, we pull it all together so that we're not putting out information on their revenue and information, but on their revenue. But yes, when we try to determine the 70%, we're gathering that from various sources.
So Kika gives us a number for the gate, or the resort gives a number for occupancy, or how does that work?
Yes, for Kika, yes, they give us that information, and then we do reach out to the various entities, Hotel Acre Villas or Andalin or the resort to get that information, and we pull that information together.
So for also, because we had exactly the same discussion last year when we talked about SATAX. So we now have started, I believe, that, for example, our beach patrol, when they have an incident, for example, some medical incident on the beach, they actually now start recording if it's a resident, a part-timer, or a tourist guest, so that we get a little bit of a proportional, percentage there as well. And I do believe that the fire department is now doing the same thing. When they have some kind of an incident that they are called to, they also start to understand, okay, is this the homeowner, is this a renter, is this a tourist, et cetera, so that we get a little bit of an additional data point, but that probably takes another half a year or a year to really have something,
Very
over,
smart. Very smart, okay.
So that's the thing. So far, we operated with a 70%. I think the additional data points will help us to either verify that or that we have to change it. But it only applies to those 4 last topics on your list that are brought forward by the town. The other applications that are coming in from Andal Inn or from the resort, et cetera, are their full amounts of the project that they
Yeah, I
are
agree.
proposing.
I agree.
Okay? Last comment to this one, because it fits in there. Kika has been advised by their lawyers not to apply for SATEX except for expenditures that are absolutely clearly dedicated and focused on tourism. So, for example, every 2 years, you see here under tab number 10, they are applying for those 5,000 roughly funds to help them pay for these maps that they're handing out to tourists and renters in particular that are coming to the first gate. So there's a clear, dedicated expense to tourism, and that's when they come to us, and we usually, I believe, have always given them the amount that they requested or very close to it. But otherwise, we don't have, at least I haven't seen for the last couple of years when I went back to before COVID, I've never seen applications from Kika for anything else than that.
Okay,
I
great.
can't say, how it was 5 years ago, but,
Yeah,
and
since
further,
I've been
but at
here,
least for
that's
the last couple of years, there was never something from Kika.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the policy on the interpretation, a question as to whether that is the town's policy or is this a Turk policy? Where does the policy itself come from?
What policy? What policy are you referring to?
The one that we're referring to, the policy on
Yeah.
the interpretation of tourism-related expenses. So that is a Department
Yes.
of Revenue policy statement. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. They should have mentioned that on the document, but yes, this is also my understanding. Okay?
Yes,
Madeline,
thanks.
you had a question?
More a comment. There were a lot of things, because I'm new to this process, that on the surface looked like, well, that's kind of odd, that these should be related to tourism in some way and that we should be funding. But the brochure that's put together answered just about every question I had, and some of them were pretty obscure. So I was going to compliment you guys on putting this together, but I guess the state did. This,
Oh, yes.
yeah, it's well done. I am missing a page or two from mine.
Brad, you had more questions, you said?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. Any more discussion about this topic?
Well,
Oh,
I guess the only, that we talked about previously is whether from a town perspective, we can do more to encourage or make the broader community aware of opportunities to apply for ATAX funding, given the fairly wide range of allowed uses, that I suspect there may be opportunities for different organizations that they
Yes.
simply are not aware of it.
We did make a concerted effort this time to push out the information. That's, since
We
we
did.
got 2 new applications because of that. The others may have just decided, for whatever reason, not to apply, but we'll continue to make efforts to push out, like Arts et cetera, if they have something that they feel may be tourist-related, they want to apply for some funds. But Acre Ellis is a new applicant, they've never applied before. St. John Fire Department, I believe they applied like right when I started, but they rarely apply. So we have, the Acre Ellis essentially manages about 200 or so short-term rentals. So what they're doing would help the short-term rental community. So yeah, we have tried, and we'll continue to push out information.
And to this point, Brad, so I spoke to various other not usual applicants far prior to this. from the fire department. I had a long conversation with Stephen Ellis, about why have you guys never applied for short-term rental? And the outcome of our conversation was basically, well, we were never aware that we could. So I think that's a process. I think that we might next year see other rental management companies to come, which is encouraged, right? I even spoke to individuals related to Freshfields, beside Freshfields itself, right, that could consider applying for SATEX money, like Endel Inn, for example. Now, this time they obviously decided not to bring forward, but it's really also on us a little bit to encourage people really to do it. Individuals, I would have a hard time to see how that might work, but I think we've been much broader in approaching people, but also in type of projects that have been proposed. And the reason why, for example, I wanted to have this number 17 on the list, the last one about the EMS truck, although knowing that it was probably a little bit premature because we didn't have all the facts yet together for this, but I wanted to see the reaction of the SATEX committee members to something like this, right? Would they be willing to support something like that, right, as our expense? Because again, you could argue, isn't that something that the county would need to do because we pay all our money to the county, our tax money to the county, et cetera. But the feedback on this particular topic was extremely supportive, right? Also because of recent incidences, I assume. But everybody that has a weight in this committee, or I would say actually everybody in the committee said, well, as soon as this comes with some more information, we would probably be very much in favor of it. So I think that helps us to get more applications for which we can use these funds.
And in a sense, I guess, careful what we wish for, ask for. For example, I assume that, I almost hate to say it, like Vicasa and VRBO could apply for ATAX.
They probably will.
Yes, and they might. Yes, very much so.
Yeah, they probably will.
So,
I
Mr.
had
Chairman,
one comment too.
Mr. Chairman, again, I'm new, so am I correct in understanding that the recommendation funding is about 2.1 and the total available is 3 million, so there's 900,000 unspent?
Yep.
Where does that go, or does it eventually get spent, or where does it
So
go?
this will stay in that bucket. And then usually for the last 2 years, I believe, because we have more money than usual, we have another SATEX meeting in the fall where we would then again receive applications and go through the same process. There is a clear definition. So these 3 million that you see here at the bottom called total available for funding, this is actually what we have to spend, right? Because there are certain time periods defined by the state within which you have to spend the funds. So these $900,000 that are now left in our bucket, by latest the end of this year, we have to decide how to spend it, right? And then the applicants would come back to us with their invoices, and then we reimburse them. So if some applicant has, for example, here Endel Inn has $212,500, it's not that they get a check now from us for that amount. They have to actually show us the invoices, and then we reimburse them.
Okay, that answers the
And
question.
also that is then another checkpoint for us to make sure that actually what they want to spend the money for, again, fits with the definition. So we had cases in the past, a little bit after the fact, where we said that was maybe borderline, and not really, supporting tourism. So that's another checkpoint for us to make sure that we are spending the money in the right channels.
There is a mechanism in the state accommodations tax statute that allows for monies to be allocated after the required 2 years in certain circumstances, and if it's for a specific project.
Yeah. But
And
you
then-
have to approve it within a given time frame. The spending is another topic.
And then the last thing, number 17, you mentioned the Charleston County Emergency Medical Services. Does Charleston County fund that through SATEX? Do we know? Do they make any contributions?
I'm not sure they do, but I don't believe they do. I think it just is all funded through taxpayers. It's just a regular line item in the department budget.
And
But we,
I would
Yeah,
I just find
imagine.
it
I don't
interesting that we
know.
fund it and they don't through SATAC.
I'm sorry.
it would be interesting to see how much relative to their budget Charleston County attracts in accommodations taxes. I would suspect accommodations taxes would be a lot lower percentage of their revenues.
Yeah, because
than-
there's not as-
Than
yeah.
is the case for us, because they collect property taxes and other revenue sources that the town doesn't have.
And a lot of the probably accommodations is probably in municipalities. I don't know how many is in unincorporated areas.
Thank you.
any more discussion?
I was just
Rory,
going to
you had
add one comment for, especially for the new members. So there is a state oversight committee that is called Tourism Expenditures Review Committee that I report every year. So they actually review, and the report is very detailed of what projects, what initiatives, how much money, and if they have any questions, if they not fall under the guidelines of the SADEX, they contact me and justify why is that. And those are also public meetings, and so just to want to ensure you that those do qualify.
Thank you.
Do we have visibility to, for instance, what Seabrook gets in monies and how they allocate it out?
Yeah, that's public information. We can probably, I can request.
And it would be very small
Very
because
small because
they don't
they're
have any
much
hotels.
smaller.
They don't have any hotels, they just have short-term rentals. So theirs is not going to be. When I've talked with my counterpart, at the time, it was definitely probably like under 100,000.
Yeah.
It was not
I mean,
that
I
much.
remember, the CVB numbers actually that show, how much the county, how much City of Charleston, Kiowa, Foley Beach, et cetera, contribute to their budget. And as it relates to Seabrook, it was very, very little.
After
Yeah,
the biggest?
yeah, Seabrook doesn't have, I mean, they don't have anything, obviously, like the resort.
Right.
And no public golf courses and stuff. So
Yeah,
there's
so-
nothing really that contributes except the increase in short-term rental.
Yeah, they have rentals, and that's it.
Just remember, yeah, state aid taxes, heads and beds.
Any more questions, please?
I can ask.
No, go ahead.
So operating a visitor information center, could we use SATEX money to buy property to build a visitor information center?
The,
Yes.
the,
Right,
it-
property.
Theoretically.
what it says is, state tax.
Yeah, you can.
So you can buy
I
property?
just don't know if you can
No,
buy
it says it-
property, but I know
Buy
if you're
property is the
building, I don't know
question.
about buying property.
Yeah, buy
It's-
property is the
it
question.
says operating a visitor information
Yep.
center. That's in contrast to, so I would say no, because one of the other elements is specifically the construction, maintenance, and operation of facilities for civic and cultural activities. So one references construction, the other does not, but you might be able to get clarification, get a ruling from.
Yeah, it was
from the
specific
Department of
about buying property, so the rest of them I understood and read, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think there's any.
I don't know about buying
Yeah,
property.
there doesn't
but-
appear to be any, tourism-related expenditures, where the list of what it includes does not include at any point buying property.
Thank you.
But for your information, for example, this little tourist information center we have at the entrance here is funded by the Charleston Visitor Bureau. So, and they use our SATEX money for that, or a portion of it. Okay, any more questions?
Yes, but I mean, I assume that we could, if we wanted to, potentially allocate some to the operation of the tourism, either to the visitor information
Don't
center,
you
because
already
there's some
allocate some
operational cost,
For
very
CVB,
modest associated
back,
with that.
our expense, we take our over operating, to operate town hall, and you allocate so much to either
I mean, it would be
county
de minimis,
or local.
but-
It would be so little.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's very little.
Yeah,
I looked
it'd
at
be
that,
de minimis.
it's, yeah. All right, any more questions from everybody? Everybody in favor?
Aye.
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 Right, thank you very much. Moving on to B, new business, review and recommendation to town council for approval of the fiscal year 2024-25 budget. Rhoda.
So today at Town Council, we're going to have a first reading of the budget. We look at this for a couple of months, couple of meetings. So today I just have a brief summary with some items and just to highlight some big differences, but please free to to ask questions or if you want to see any more details. So we are budgeting revenues of about 15.2 million, which is a decrease from what we projecting for this year. It's a decrease of about 729,000 or 5%. And that decrease is mostly related to a decrease in building permits from special projects. We collected about $900,000 this year for the permits for the Upper Beachwalker project, and there is no special projects for next year planned. Therefore, there is a big decrease, and also the interest income with the anticipation of the interest rates going down, and we're projecting a decrease in that. Just to show you the history of our revenues, all the rest of revenues, I'm budgeting pretty much flat, or with just a little 1-2% increase to account for inflation. And you'll see on that graph too that 2023 was our best year in collection, and that was pretty much accommodation taxes and the business license revenue based on the and a huge increase in the construction right after the COVID year. Oops. This is so sensitive. So this is just to show you that the makeup of our revenues. We do have a variety or of types of revenues coming in, but mostly we need to remember that we are pretty much heavily related on economy and tourism. So if they are doing well, we're doing well. As far as the expenditures, we're budgeting about 14.8 million. It's an increase of about 3 million to what we're projecting for this year. And the main factors for this increase are, first, personnel cost. There are a couple of items in that bucket. There is a 10% aggregate salary increase. The main item that contributes to this huge increase in a salary or personal expenses is the increase of full-time employees. As you can see, from 2021 to next year budgeted, there is a 10 new employees hired. So that's. There's also some statutory increases in healthcare insurance and retirement. And with more people, there is, of course, more to it, too. Another big increase is in our waste services. We signed a new contract a couple of months ago, and so that's what contributes to that increase. Consultants, it's a number of new projects and new initiatives that we're looking for your approval. And also the tourism and recreations that we just talked about, the state accommodation tax recipients. We've collected a lot, we had a lot of money in that pool. We have 3 million that we need to spend because there is 2 years, as we just talked about, to spend the money. So therefore, there is a huge increase comparing to this year. And just to give you a makeup of our expenditures, again, the personnel is the biggest cost. Tourism and recreation follows, and some other. And with that budget, this proposed draft, if approved, will continue pretty much growth in our fund balances. And fund balances are like, just for the new council, is pretty much equivalent to retained earnings in the business world. The orange one is a general fund. We have really healthy balance in that. The green is the fund balance from special funds, but we don't really need to keep a balance on it because we need to spend. Those are all the accommodation taxes, those hospitality taxes that need to be spent, and the capital and emergency fund, as you see, keeps growing. So that's my presentation, and I don't know if you had a chance to look at the detail, or we spoke earlier last month, and if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
I think we should have a motion first, and then we'll get into discussion.
Yeah, can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
I have we didn't vote yet on the motion.
That's
It was second.
Discuss first.
discussion.
All right, fine.
Sorry, should have said that.
So I have a number of overarching questions. One of them is, at the last year's retreat, we discussed that as the island is getting to the end of its build-out, our revenue is going to decrease. And we're seeing that now starting to happen in fiscal year '25. My overarching concern, before I get into details, is we are increasing our expenses as we're decreasing revenue. That's an overarching concern that I have.
I would probably say, so I don't know if that's a question directed towards
Well, it's
staff
really not
or more
the
for
way I
you all,
said it.
because as you're looking at the budget, you all can look at where can we maybe reduce expenses, or just note, because we have pulled from our revenue, our reserves before, but just note how you would like staff, to direct staff and how you would like to address
Well, I guess
that.
it's just more of a comment to the rest of the council, that observation that we have to be really careful. We can't just look at a snapshot of today of where we are. We have to look what's going to happen in the next 5 years. And we all said at last year's retreat, the revenue is going to go down. So we have to be careful that we don't get out of control here.
So I think, Russ, first of all, I fully agree with this. Second of all, remember, we actually postponed, well, first of all, this is a budget, and a lot of the things different to the corporate world, need to still come in front of us before it is spent.
Yes.
Right? It's in there, but most of it, of the, one-time, expenditures, et cetera, even individual, headcount additions, et cetera, comes before Ways and Means and Council, before it's really, going to be spent. That's one. Second, remember last fall, we actually decided to postpone some of the spendings that were in the 23-24 budget until we had more clarity how our top line actually will perform over the course of 23-24. And then we brought it back in January or February when we had more confidence that actually our top line in particular was tracing, and as it is right now as well, above budget. So that we felt like, okay, we can spend that money. Right?
I recall that.
And then third is I have quite a few questions to some of the things in the budget where I would be very hesitant to approve it, when it comes before us, right? So that's another element where we have to be cautious.
Right.
But I think what we have to do is really watching, on a monthly basis, on a quarterly at least basis, how our revenue performs and how our expenses perform.
Oh,
And that
absolutely.
will help us then to make decisions to, for example, not approve what although was budgeted, but not move forward with it for exactly those concerns that you have voiced.
So somewhat apropos of that, and maybe on a go-forward basis, this is something we can look more closely at, is it's hard to discern from these expenditures what constitutes what one would characterize as a fixed expense versus fixed variable versus one-off. And that's hard to gauge, the trend line on each of those would probably better inform our decision-making. Typically, if you're managing against a budget, you want to know what are your true fixed costs?
Okay.
What are the things that are, like I said, fixed variable, and what are the ones that are almost completely discretionary or not, or you can control the lever on? And, with one-time cost, whether those can be absorbed, need to be absorbed now or can be pushed off to a subsequent period.
Okay, so I can prepare like I said, today, today we'll have the first reading, but after your comments, I'll gather the comments and I can prepare answers to you and I can send to you and then incorporate them for the second reading if there will be some changes or changes now too. So
Right, that's
there
a
is
great
information.
idea, because I have a list of things that I don't think we necessarily have to debate, at least not in the first reading. In the second reading, we can. I can just go through all of these comments I have in the budget, and then you can get back to us. Do you guys think that's a good idea? It'll save
I
time.
provided that feedback already in that sense.
For yours?
Where I have sent to Stephanie and Dorota some months ago, 2 months ago, or months ago, where I would have question marks to each of these different.
Okay, to save time then, all right, so that's not a bad idea. So should we each individually send our comments rather than discussing them here?
You're welcome to do that.
No, I mean, rather than discussing them here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. It's far more effective.
All right, so where are we going to discuss them, though? Because one of the things, I'm going to just use as an example, the interns, we're paying for interns. Usually interns are free.
Not
Well,
necessarily.
not necessarily with the
I-
College of,
Not in
In the
this-
private
not-
sector, they can be. It's more challenging to have free help in the public sector.
It's
Yeah.
even
So
in
that's
the,
not-
even in the
all right.
corporate world, it
Yeah.
has become
It's-
rather
it's
common that
becoming
get
more-
a
we
little
work with the College of Charleston, and typically it's hard to get interns at no cost. So it is a reduced cost, it still is very reduced, but
understand.
we have to pay for
But
interns.
I would recommend, why don't we all, provide your questions and concerns as it relates to, especially those first 3 pages that I'm looking at called expenditures, which is pages 6, 7, and 8 in your book, and provide your questions and your feedback and your concerns.
Great, a
Can
good
can we
idea.
share those questions with everybody as we give the feedback, or is that a meeting?
No,
If
that
you
would be,
don't hit reply all, yes, but I would recommend just give it to Dorota individually. She will summarize it for the second reading, and then we can make decisions during the second reading, I assume.
correct.
Or Mayor Belt will.
I guess one
maybe already
question
decide
is
to take
is
something.
whether some of the larger items, it warrants some discussion now and/or at council, because we're making a recommendation to council. Because at some point, if there's like, all of a sudden $1 million is carved out, is that appropriate adjustment for second reading, or do you need to go back to
Yeah.
first reading? At some point, I don't know kind of where the line drawing is. It's harder on the numbers.
It
but-
is hard.
Yeah.
Can I just ask one general question, because it's still overarching, but not getting into the details, and it's related to what I discussed earlier today on the state tax. On page 8, we have a whole bunch of budget transfers. And
yes.
so my question is only about the legality of it. I'm not saying, there's a number of transfers from the hospitality tax fund to other locations.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to do that?
Yes, so we are. So what it is, we have this is our policy to transfer from local accommodation and hospitality tax. The previous council, or 2 councils ago, created the policy. As we have a huge number of tourism on the island, and we feel it's only 20% of the revenues that are coming from hospitality tax and local accommodation tax, or transfer to fund emergency and future capital projects such as beach renourishment.
Okay, so my question then, I have a follow-up. So are there spending requirements or limitations for hospitality tax, the LA tax?
Yes, for tourism. Tourism provide for tourism or safety of tourism. So we do feel that beach renourishment, as I mentioned, we will do it at some point, and we just accumulating money for that project that will
Okay.
be paid from that fund.
All right, so I'm just going to ask, and I don't want to get into it now. I'll ask you to provide then the guidelines for how we are allowed to expend these funds. So
Well,
I can
it's a
make sure.
policy that was created by council, so she can give you
That's
what the policy,
fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine, whatever they
It's-
are.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, can I ask about, sorry, did you have something?
Sure,
to say?
and and the hospitality tax itself, it's in our ordinance. When the council imposed hospitality tax, how it could be spent. So I can send you those two
Great,
documents.
thanks.
Can you talk about why interest income is going down $300,000?
So right now, currently all our investments are with the local investment pool, South Carolina LGIP.
LG, the Local
yeah.
Government Investment Pool.
Local government investment pool. And the interests are at, right now, last month were about 5.6. And, as the Feds met last week and they hold the rates for a little bit, but it is in anticipation that the rates will start going down. And we, as a municipality, have our investment guidelines are for safety. So investment instruments are really limited to pretty much treasury bills, bonds. It's very limited. And hopefully it will not go down that much, but this is just how the market will.
So let me ask a follow-up. So do you know what the maturity or the duration of that pool is?
So this is short term. They only offer short term, and and one other thing is that
Was that 3-month or 6-month maturity or?
it's like cash.
Okay.
So how they invest it, but for us it's like cash. We can withdraw the next day.
So one thing we can certainly take a look at, and actually, before I get to this point, what's the assumed average rate of return on our fixed income policies currently in our current budget versus what you're projecting for 24, 25?
4%, I'm projecting at 4%.
So,
5 points.
that's probably, given there's no indication that the Fed is going to do anything more than perhaps a, 25 basis point or half point rate cut in the current year, if that. It may be that it warrants something a little bit higher than 4%, but.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was
yeah.
going. If the Fed cuts rates once or twice this year,
Yeah.
it's going to happen in November and December is what the market is saying.
Yeah.
And there'll be 25 basis points probably. And then there might be as many as 4 next year, but if you have to average them
Yeah.
over the year, so that means 2. So you're down probably 0.75%. That's probably way more than the $300,000 deduction you have in there.
So, and there is also, there is some discussion that we had in the past, and depending on if there's any big purchases that the town will have. Like this year we had some money in contingency. We have 5 million for possibly buying the real estate office. That is not the case anymore. However, there is some talks about some other bigger projects. So if we will reduce those the total of those reserves for that too. But if you feel that I'm trying to be conservative.
And that's reasonable, and that may be just not that difference, but I just want to point out to Councilmember Farrell that we are taking a look at the investment policy statement and investment management services, not to onboard more risk. It is a reserve fund, so it's going to be primarily fixed income matched against our expected potential liabilities, but there may be some opportunity for a more laddered structure where you have some longer term, not all short term.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with the South Carolina municipal fund, given what we're trying to do. It's, when people hear rate cuts, they think that's going to happen immediately and it's going to be full magnitude right then. It doesn't. It happens over a long period of time, and so it's coming down, 30% is probably more than our interest income is going to come down. And then if you spend money, then that's a one-time hit, and you can adjust then based on one-time expenditure. But in terms of budgeting, you should budget, I think, through the year, so.
But do you
Just
guys have a
interesting if-
problem with the conservative approach that Dorota took? Or, I'm not exactly sure where this is taking us now.
I'm okay with the conservative approach. I'm just pointing out it's probably not that much as we go through the next year.
Well, but that refers to what I said earlier. We are monitoring this on a monthly and especially quarterly basis. If we are seeing that, we are not losing as much interest, income as projected, then that's good for us.
Yeah.
Right? And we can make decisions accordingly. But I think it's prudent to be, conservative on the top line, right? And be a little bit more, forthcoming on the expenses side, then that gives us a good, way of looking at, where we stand with our finances.
Sense to me.
Right? Since there are topics in our current expenditures and one-time, cost that maybe some of you, certainly me, included, that we would question, that's something we can do over the course of those 12 months and decide if we want to go for it or not. Okay? Does that make sense?
Well, over the course of 12 months, some of these, I guess, in the context of sitting down and the administration presenting a potentially somewhat revised budget based upon the input that's provided from all the council members, there may be some things that actually by second reading then that some of the items, one time, or some of the operational levels may be different than presented in here.
And this can be both ways, right? For example, what I already, emailed you a couple of weeks ago is that we wanted to add, more help for Petra to get these meeting minutes done, right? And I think that's not in the budget yet.
We're actually, what we're doing as a town is that we have a software called Pirate AI that everyone is going to be using, and Petra has already used it, and that's why most of the town council minutes have been.
Almost verbatim.
Yeah, so we are using, which is a much probably cheaper, but everyone that's going to be doing their meetings, we're using Pirate AI. We're going to test that out and see how that
Where
works.
is the money for that software in here?
It's not a software, it's
miscellaneous.
it's just in my budget. It's just essentially, it's an annual cost, and I've already paid for it out of
And it's
this year.
not that much, is it?
Well, we have, I think, like 13 licenses, and it's going to cost like $2,200 a year.
Yeah, that's.
It's not-
De minimis.
right,
And one
right.
of the other thing, by the way, was exploring with council, not clear that this is allowed in South Carolina. It is in other jurisdictions where a municipality could deem that its official minutes constitutes a video or audio recording supplemented by written summary thereof. Now, that would be less work than has been the case heretofore for the town clerk, but it may be actually more if this Pirate AI software, then all of a sudden we just have verbatim
Correct.
minutes, but it's
And we're
easier.
looking at that with MAC, and so we're going to it would be an ordinance change to come in and essentially say that, because we live stream the meetings, or we have audio, that's part of the minute meetings, and then that her minutes would be there'll be more of just kind of a synopsis or something.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
All right, so please, all of us, provide input to Dorota in the coming days. Questions and concerns so that we can get a summary of those for the second reading in June. Correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, any more discussion about the budget for fiscal year 24-25? Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to new business C, review and recommendation to the town council for approval of the consultant to conduct the municipal law enforcement coverage feasibility study on tab 4.
And Brian is going to speak on this, and I will chime in, and Mr. Berner can chime in. Director Harris' wife had an incident and caused her to be in the hospital, so he's in Orangeburg. He's sorry that he cannot make the meeting today.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So please forgive me if this isn't maybe as in-depth and thorough as you had hoped. I'm doing this in Craig's stead. But so just by a quick way of background, specifically for Mr. Farrell. So the town has historically, I think since about 2013, had a contract with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office for full-time deputies on the island. And we've had great coverage from them. In the past couple of years, we've been looking into developing our own police force or some kind of police force out here on the island. In the middle of that, last year, or maybe it was 2 years ago, the sheriff removed that full-time contract from the town, kind of pulled the rug out from under us. We didn't see it coming, so that kind of fast-tracked this idea of getting our own police force on the island through the town. So although we don't have the full-time deputy contract right now, we still have the off-duty contract where they'll give us officers for some coverage. Yes, sir.
So just to clarify this also again for Luke and for Madeline, the way you're describing it might be a possible outcome, but it's not the focus of the study. Okay, the focus of the study is to explore every possible alternative we might have to meet the objectives of a better police coverage. Having our own police department might be one of them, but only one of
absolutely.
them. And it's certainly not the objective of the study to gear us towards that only solution. We want to know what are the options, what are the implications, what are the do's and don'ts and the costs and everything, and then we can decide. But I just want to make clear also then for the consultant that we are not given direction to come up with only one solution that means our own police department.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank
So
you for that
I
clarification.
think that our head of public works was kind of pulled into this as a result of our head of public safety not being available. But this is a conversation I've had with the town administrator and Councilmember Berner and the important role of public safety. The chairman is absolutely correct that the first phase, and that's all that this feasibility study constitutes at this point, is simply a needs assessment and gap analysis, exactly as the chairman outlined. And then based upon that report, those findings, we can determine whether a second phase is necessary. That will be a separate decision made by the council at a future date as to, and if it is a recommendation that we should augment the current set of capabilities that we have access to, whether it's our own public safety staff, whether it's CCSO, whether it's KIGR, and other resources, whether we need to augment that within the municipality, then the second phase would start looking at what that is to look like. But my expectation is that, and Stephanie and Councilmember Berner through Public Safety Committee are going to be very, very involved in that effort.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for clarifying that for the record, for people here and who's listening with us. So again, just to kind of reiterate what the both of y'all just kind of described, the project scope is going to be evaluating needs assessment and gap analysis within our public safety for the island. The firm that is contracted for this is going to look at services from Charleston County Sheriff's Office, the Public Safety Department, and security personnel from Kiawah Island Resort and the Kiawah Island Community Association. And they're going to dissect those responsibilities and roles to see where there's any overlap or where there can be extra coverage. And so then after looking at that, they're going to explore alternatives and comparing them with potential municipal policing options. Again, not to say that that's the recommendation that they're going to give, but they will give basically just an outlook. This is, again, a feasibility study to see where we can have better service, better coverage if needed, and how that will look within the municipal entity. They're looking at our safety and security goals to come up with practical, efficient, cost-effective strategies. So they had five firms bid on this, and there was an extensive review from the public safety director and the public safety committee. They vetted all of these firms thoroughly, and they ended up wanting to recommend the Center for Public Safety Management as their firm for approval for this. The Ways and Means committee is being asked to recommend the Center for Public Safety Management for the amount of $72,629 to the town council. So if there is any questions,
I'd be more,
I
yes.
can try to answer.
Well, I just
Mr.
wanted
Burner
to,
or
Can I-
myself can
can I
answer 'em.
first have a motion?
Motion, I move
Do you have
the,
a motion to approve
So
the
moved.
recommendation
Second.
to the town council? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Any questions?
well, I don't have a question, I just wanted to provide additional information. So we had a committee in the Safety Committee that each individual of the committee individually reviewed all of the proposals. And we each independently rated the proposers, and we all ranked CPSM as number one. So I wanted to give you guys a certain degree of comfort. It wasn't that one individual picked party A and the another individual picked party B. We all selected the exact same candidate. So we all felt the same way, that they were the strongest of the bunch. It doesn't mean necessarily that they were ideally or perfectly in line with what our scope was, but they were the best of the bunch, rather than going out to resolicit bids, which we didn't want to do. So I wanted to let you guys know that.
More questions? I have a few comments, just for what's worth. So in Director Harris's report, under project scope and objectives, I think they should also talk to the fire department. It's in their quote document, but it's not there just so we are complete. Having been a consultant for a long time in my beginning of my career, I would have loved the comment on the first page on the bottom saying future phases, because I already know what my next budget is going to be. So be very careful with that. I would then recommend on page 3 of their proposal that there are I think also the opportunity to sit down with council members, not just with, community, et cetera, because we hear a lot from the community. So it would also be good if the consultant would schedule some meetings with us individually. The key question really is the needs assessment. So they all talk in here, Russ, about, the needs assessment, et cetera, but they never talk about what that exactly means and what the outcome of that really means.
I know,
Is that like okay, we want to achieve, a response time in average of X? Is that the outcome? I mean, what is really at the end, because they measure everything against that need assessment, but what is that really going to be? That was not clear to me.
I know, none of the proposers were very clear. A lot of them that just seemed to parrot, or they had standard literature that they just pumped out there. They did not, unfortunately, and it was frustrating from my point, they did not provide an independent proposal for the town of Kiowa. It just seemed to be their company literature retyped. So I don't have an answer to your question. But
without-
what
I mean, I'm not
I'm going to
look-
be deeply involved with this, though,
Okay.
moving forward.
So I was not looking as an answer to say, yes, our response time should be X because, the number of inhabitants on the island or whatsoever. But is it the response time or is it something else? I mean, what is the criteria maybe there are even several criteria that we will use or they will use to define the need against which we compare all the different options.
And one of
what
the-
is just that ratio?
I think one of the things, I would probably say from the consultants and working with, essentially we have to have a kickoff meeting or two with them, and it would have to be involved, whatever this committee is. And I think from this committee and discussing with consultants, we would essentially help kind of provide that additional information so that they can create kind of that answer to our question in terms of the needs, because they would really need to get in here. They really need to understand us as a resort. They need to understand the different layers that we have to be able to spit out that
As
information.
long as we are sensitive to this,
Right.
that's all I wanted
Right.
to achieve, because that's what I'm missing. I mean, I'm not really sure what that outcome is.
I think you're spot on, Mr. Chairman. There is still a disconnect, to the extent we're taking a little bit this at faith right now, that the selection committee determined that this was the best entity out of the ones that submitted applications, we outlined our scope of work, which needs to be further refined in terms of managing the consultant process. It is still frustrating, to your point, that this material, table of contents of 30 pages, is almost, most of it is irrelevant to what the actual scope of work is. But given both the recommendation of the Public Safety Review Committee that looked at this, and at least I'm somewhat comforted by this firm certainly appears to have a fair amount of data analytics capability that, yes, it is perhaps better suited, but it's going to require a lot of management of the consultant.
And I'm okay. I mean,
that's-
I just wanted to make sure we're all sensitive about exactly this point.
I understand, so
And
I'm
then I'm
gonna,
okay with it.
I will be deep diving into this, just to let you know, so one of the other proposals that came in almost looked like it was done by a high schooler on a Mac PC. It was very, very unprofessional. It was surprising how poor it was. Another one just came in and he basically just said, here are the individuals, and they retyped our RFP. I was quite surprised. I really was very, very surprised how poorly written the proposals were. Of the bunch, we collectively felt this one was the best because it had the ability to correlate and present data in a way that at least I, as an engineer, wanted to see. And the rest of the recommendation committee felt the same way.
Yeah, and your strengths and concerns, were very helpful.
And
Right,
Russ,
to
if-
understand.
if this is the best of what you got, and it sounds like you're still not satisfied, do we need to go back out and look for possible?
I
other
didn't want
consultants?
to. That's a valid question. We can discuss that as council right now. It's a valid question. I didn't want to because we're just going to lose even more time.
I think maybe, not to speak on behalf of the public safety director or committee, but perhaps that can be a contingency, is we get those questions answered about what's the criteria, what's our outcome that you guys are gonna tell us, that is gonna let us determine how we move forward with ancillary supplementary, public safety and law enforcement.
I think one thing we have to also be mindful of is the data analysis and capture is going to be almost wholly outside our control. In that most of the information we want, we have to gain, because their proposal, all these proposals assume you were doing data analysis of an existing department, and you control dispatch and everything else, and you held the data. That's not the case here.
That's
So-
not exactly true, Brad, because I looked at it, that they would look at the Charleston Sheriff's Office.
Yes.
As such.
That's what
right?
I'm saying.
Not ours, but yes.
That's what I'm
going to.
saying, that our consultant, we're gonna have to rely on to get, in order to actually get the information we want on the cooperation of CCSO and other organizations. We hope that's forthcoming, but given challenges in the past, we'll have to see how that plays out. I did just, by the way, want to thank the staff for adding in the 2 pages that provided the analysis and the compare and contrast strengths and weaknesses of the different proposals. And on a going forward basis, from the staff perspective, we'll continue to try to enhance the information that's provided to whether the Ways and Means Committee or Council with regard to RFPs that go out, submissions that are received in terms of, there's even getting to the point going forward where we actually have kind of decisional criteria, what the committee waived, how they evaluated it, weight attributed to each criteria. And that's in part to protect the town as well, because, if you don't take the lowest cost bid, then you avoid the potential, if you have a good record of getting somebody to sue, saying, we were the lowest cost provider, you should have provided the bid to us. That happens in the federal government a lot. I don't think it happens much around here, but I want to thank the staff for their additional work on that.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question of the group? You guys have spent a lot of time on this, I know, and I'm brand new to this, but how do you guys think about, and this comes back to the needs assessment or the gap analysis. What if the issues we find are predominantly, let's just say, people who are not supposed to be on the island who've gotten through the gate in some way that's inconsistent with what the gate is supposed to do, and they've, had 3 fistfights at the club, how do we determine whether that's really our responsibility or whether it's the KICA responsibility for gate security, or whether it's the club or the resort's responsibility for policing on their own grounds? How do you guys think about that? And then it's also, we're responding to something where kind of the gate security is the prevention mechanism. So can you talk to me about that, or have you?
That's a very tough issue, and I'm bringing it up because I know I, for one, and others in town council have met and discussed this with various members of KICA, and there's a lot of pushback
About
about
improving gate
making
security?
about making changes, improving the restriction of people onto the island that don't belong. It sounds surprising, but that's what is actually going on. Without getting into names and everything else, they're very reticent to clamping down much more.
I think it's not only Kika, Russ, it's also the resort.
I know, I didn't want to
But
get into,
do-
I
but
know, I didn't want to get into
but-
that.
But I have.
I intentionally did not say that.
I see some silver lining at the horizon that I think everybody starts to recognize that there's maybe something we need to look into. But I think what really matters here for us here is not, to segregate, is this now maybe something that was caused, the incident was caused, by Kika or the resort or whatever. We have a responsibility for the entire island, for our residents and visitors as a town. So if the study would show, phase 1 would show that we have response times to incidences that are, critical incidences, not just, somebody's falling off a bike, but critical incidences of, multiple minutes that are just so far above what is acceptable. I think that's what we need to focus on. That then there are maybe side topics coming up because we discover that there's a certain, group of people that shouldn't have been on the island, then we will attack it. But I don't think that it will diminish the objective of the study to really focus on, okay, what's the status, what are the response times, what are the type of incidences, and how are we going to better solve the urgency from the community to better serve these incidences. I think that's what really matters at the end.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm still kind of stuck because let's say that the response time was terrible, but for the sake of argument, all of the issues that happened, all of the bike accidents or the fistfights or whatever happened, were folks who weren't supposed to be on the island. So that's where I'm struggling. Should we create a police force? Should the outcome be dictated by the actions, or should the outcome be dictated by something else? Or should the outcome be something else that prevents it from happening in the first place? And I don't know, I'm just learning here, so I'm just kind of raising this to help you guys, help me think about that.
Again, I think there is a possibility, but I have to say those incidences that I know about that happened, critical incidences that happened over the last 12 months, might it be a severe accident, might it be, somebody called in, a bomb threat or something like this. They were all issues that were not related to people that should not have been on the island. I'm not saying that this cannot be the case or is not be the case, but I would hope that the data, cleansing and analysis will show it.
Might approach that from a slightly different way, with agreeing with everything that's been said, is that for better or for worse, the town has no role whatsoever in controlling who has access to the island.
Well, and that feasibility study could certainly determine that that's what's needed, is there needs to be better gate control.
Well,
you know.
that they may conclude that the town doesn't have any ability to direct or impose that, but we may well be informed by, in terms of the policy, any policy decision we make, and so we should have ongoing communications with, to the extent to which those entities that do have control over access to this island are putting in place additional measures or not to better control access to the island. So if there is, if hypothetically, Kika was saying, we're going to put in a QR code control system to access the front gate. Nobody gets past the first gate unless you have a pre-existing reservation to use island services or something like that, and that will better stop the flow of people who are not really visitors or guests of a property owner, whether it's the resort or the club, then that might suggest that some of the stuff that you're alluding to may be less of an issue in the future. But we don't know that yet.
Right, then.
Okay, if I can just add one thing, Mr. Chairman, as we were talking, also, please don't lose sight, because I hear a lot about on the island. As a town, we also have to be mindful that we are also responsible for fresh fields. We have a new ER facility coming, we have sea fields. So the discussion and review is not just for behind the gates, it's for all of the town, which includes a lot of commercial establishments that's coming our way, more people coming from Johns Island. We're going to have an ER facility. We don't know how that's going to be, what's going to happen there. So we're going to be responsible for more than just behind the gate.
And
So
Beachwalker
keep-
Park,
and
right,
Beachwalker,
Mingo
right.
Point, and so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we should not forget
the
that.
mayor and I discussed that this morning. The population of people here is going to increase significantly in the next.
So, and that's one reason why we need to have a good working relationship with CCSO, because if Andale West is built out similar size to Freshfields, it's still within unincorporated Charleston County, as Kiowa River State completes its build-out, and Kiowa River is only about a third of its way through its build-out. There's going to be an additional
Right.
Clearly.
population count, and
Clearly.
you assume that a lot of those would be pulled down to
Pulling in,
services and
Because Johns
facilities.
Island, from the census, Johns Island was the fastest growing community in Charleston County.
Yeah, we
So-
all know that from driving the roads, but, going back to a question, the Madeline you had earlier, that's one of the reasons, if not actually the reason why I didn't want to resolicit this. Because right now, as explaining this to the mayor, as an engineer in construction, you always try to anticipate problems and prevent them before they occur. The timing is now. We have to have this study now, because the wave of increased of guests and visitors is going to be here before we know it, and we have to be ready for it.
And what is the timeline? When are we anticipating completion?
155 days.
Yeah, it's about a 6-month duration for the results. And then we may or may not go to phase 2, and it's going to take a lot of time.
Page 20. So my last comment, Russ and Brad, for you guys probably working on the contract, I would recommend that, there are clear project milestones. I mean, there's an outline of project schedule and milestone on page 28 of the document. That somewhere, we need to make sure that they are really, reported to that, committee that you mentioned, Russ.
Sure.
Either the safety or the subcommittee of it.
Yeah.
And maybe at some point even the council. And then second, we should be allowed in the contract to cancel this assignment at any given time. Because if we are not happy with what we are discovering, in terms of, data precision, or, I don't want to, I would not like to run into the same issues we had with the Performing Arts Center project, where we were all kind of unhappy, but couldn't really stop it.
Right. That's a fair point.
That's my only two final
That's a very
comments.
fair point.
Okay?
And need to, I think that's a valid point, like to bake into and having the town attorney look at standardizing municipal contracts and have a provision in all contracts where essentially termination for convenience of the government or municipality. But we would still be obligated to pay an essentially incurred expenses or cost, and there isn't really quite a phase in here, but that's a good thought. And particularly, apart from whether we're happy with their work, if, for example, Charleston County says, not interested in talking to your consultant at all, we have to kind of reevaluate.
That's my
Yeah,
point
yeah,
as well,
yeah,
right? If we see that certain milestones are not met, either in terms of quality or inability, we need to be able to step away from this.
By the way, I don't know, this gets a little too down in the weeds, but I assume even Charleston County isn't cooperating. You could submit FOIA request for data, but then you're not going to
Then
be
your
within the 30
timeline is
days.
off.
The timeline's off, yeah.
All right, so with that being said, related to, Mr. Mayor, what you and I have talked about many times is having boilerplate contracts. We don't have one yet. So what are we going to use as the contract for this assignment?
So we do have somewhat a boilerplate contract. I'm going to get that to Mac based on the comments here and have him refresh it for the mayor's review.
Where we basically want to end up with, like, just a lot of, if you deal with like a big corporate entity, and you're a service provider or vendor to them, you use their contract.
Right, I know, that's
Yeah,
all I said,
not
but-
your
but-
own.
but we don't have anything
No,
ready
and
to
so
go
it'll
yet.
be all the standard things like reps and warranties, indemnification, bonding, insurance, dispute resolution. All of that will be standardized in every contract, so there doesn't have to be any reinventing the
Right, but
wheel.
what are we going to use now? Because
Well,
we're
We'll
not
be
there
able
yet.
to, so our Hainsworth, Sinclair Boyd, they represent 5 municipalities. We can work with them to get a standard contract for now, so that won't be delayed.
Okay.
We'll get that taken care of.
Okay, thank you. That was the whole point. We're ready to move forward with this, and we can't wait for Mac to do his boilerplate contract stuff. Okay.
But we will have on things like this, make sure that the town attorney, the firm reviews contracts.
Okay.
Regardless.
Okay, so we have a motion, we had discussion, anything else? Can I have a vote, please? Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to new business D, review and recommendation to the town council for approval of conducting the Kiowa Island Parkway annual traffic counts. Mr. Taylor.
Good morning. Before you is a request for annual traffic counts on our parkway. As you all are aware, the town, we have conducted traffic counts along the Kiowa Island Parkway, specifically as it relates to our previously executed 2013 amended and restated development agreement. What's being proposed or recommended is that we continue to conduct traffic studies, traffic counts along the parkway, even though the development agreement and its mitigation requirements based within have now expired. And so as that, the recommendation is for us to continue that, both planning, and I've also consulted with our public safety and public works department, and to make sure that they also can have this particular data as we assess the parkway. You'll see that we've reduced the amount of locations, and so primarily we're only looking at from the roundabout to the front gate. We included Beach Walker and then Kiowa Beach Drive as 2 significant intersections, as data from those particular intersections, in addition to the parkway, are relevant. As we know, beyond those points, traffic tends to disperse throughout the island. And so within there, you see Quality Counts as being the recommended vendor or contractor to provide these services. They've worked with us in the past 2 counts, and we've had a good working relationship to be able to address any particular concerns that may arise in the deployment of these technologies. This will follow what was done last year as proposed, which are pneumatic tubes that fly across the roadway, in addition to cameras that will be placed out to capture any missing data between the two. And so this totals for a cost proposal of $18,225, which is under a little bit less. Try to keep it under the 20,000 mark. We did exceed 25,000 based on our budget from last year to 2,700, but this would be compounded do 80% restricted funds and 20 general funds.
Thank you, John. Can I please have a motion to approve the
So
recommendation?
moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Any discussion?
I tend to always be the guy who speaks first, so I'll do that in this spaces as well. I don't think we need to do this. We already have a lot of historical data. I mean, previously, we had to do the traffic count because it was a requirement of the ARDA. We already have that historical data. I'm not sure we need to have a traffic count every year, and what are we going to do with the data when, now that the ARDA is expired, what are we going to do with the data? I don't see what we're going to get benefit-wise out of this. It comes at some point in time, next year or the year after, where we have concerns of increased traffic, then we can perform the study then. I don't think we need to do it today.
I would very much agree. The only thing that I could see is that we would have one checkpoint on Beachwalker Drive and get all the other data from Kika.
That's good, that's a good idea.
But spending 20,000 or something on this, I absolutely don't see the need.
One question is, how much does it vary depending on how many pneumatic tubes you have? What is the cost versus just the project, or how the vary, how does it vary?
So it would depend on the number of the locations, not the extra tubes. So we could reduce it based on the number of locations, excluding some of those checkpoints that are currently listed. The one thing that I would share is this conversation was had internally just to think about not doing these traffic counts this year. Primarily, there were, with us going into looking at where Andale West, having a preset note of where before Andale West is constructed, and the impacts of what may occur for the Beachwalker development projects, having a base point and using that to compare for future development. So it would be utilizing today as a benchmark and then reevaluating sort of every other year or every 3 years doing these traffic counts.
And that's a fair point, John. I agree with what you just said, but I think we already have a baseline. You just go to last year's data.
Very much so.
So I agree in part that we don't need, I don't think we need, agree with you all, as many coming onto Island as we do. Where my thought was, where the traffic counts might be useful, that I don't think we have any data right now, is coming into the circle. How much traffic is coming down towards Kiowa Island, down Betsy Carrison right now? We don't have a good benchmark on that. Then how much spins off to Seabrook, how much goes directly into Freshfields, and how much then goes on towards Kiowa Island?
We have that data.
What would we do with that?
It's going to start informing, again, what the load management's going to be, how many people are going to be, we don't have any data about the numbers compared to benchmark going to be coming into Freshfields Village, for example.
Permanent data from the.
So
wrong-
What's that?
In addition,
But
we have
that doesn't show up here.
no,
Because we have it permanently.
a separate traffic measuring tool at the roundabout that does measure traffic coming into the circle.
Yes.
Built, my apologies then. So we get those 3 different data points or more?
For the
Yes.
whole year.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
and South Carolina DOT has their annual traffic counts that they do just past Resurrection Road, I believe. So that's another metric that if we wanted to count traffic on Betsy Carrison.
Okay, that's, all right. So that would be, I've never seen this information. It'd be useful to see what the trend lines have been on traffic coming down Betsy Carrison, entering in the circle. And where that traffic disperses after it comes into the circle. But then, if that's the case, I'm not sure how much of a need there is for much additional.
Exactly. So go on.
How would you defend it, John?
No, so to that point, if we were to exclude it, I would just recommend us continuing at least Beachwalker Drive and at least one across the bridge. But beyond that, I think there's valid reasoning to not conduct all 9 traffic locations.
John, is there normally in normal municipalities, it's always good to do this type of work annually from a planning perspective, because
Correct.
then you can typically use that to plan infrastructure needs, look at potential backup of traffic, anything that you may want to put in. Because we're unique, one way in, one way out, is there anything from a planning perspective that would help get new numbers this year for Beach Walker Drive or for portions of Parkway? Or is this something that you could say, okay, we can do this next year?
So the additional points that I'll reference doing that is we have had discussions, as you know, regarding potential impact fees, really at a base level, not for the town to begin collecting impact fees, but as part of our state statute regarding impact fees, if we were to go down that route, we would need to, as a town, ensure that we understand what those true impacts are. And so whether that's specifically for traffic, having traffic volumes would be a critical part to knowing that assessment of whether that's time delay, whether that's volume, knowing what that risk or impacts are to that infrastructure component. And this would be relative around traffic. That would be the argument of why we would need to ensure that we have that, if that's an immediate need within this next year, if the town were to move in that direction.
Right, so I think I would like to withdraw my motion, right? Because I brought the motion forward. I would like to withdraw the motion and bring in forward a new motion that we would table this for the next 12 months and ask John to be even more conservative in how many data points we really need.
Well,
So I guess if you're just asking a table, I don't know if you need to, so you're just asking to have a motion to just table it.
Well,
Is that what-
I do take your point about, for example, we know what goes through, we have data about what goes through the main gate. What we don't have good data on is how much of the traffic's diverted before the main gate coming across and goes down Beach Walker. I guess to your point, John, is that if you learn that, there was a new development project and it's resulting in double the amount of traffic or, infrastructure usage, that might inform whether council would ever want to go down that path, any potential assessment of impact fees. So you would have a data point to measure.
But we have that data point because we know how many people exit the roundabout here towards Kiowa. Now, yes, some people could still go into Freshfields, but I would say this is
Yeah,
probably a
yeah.
lower percentage. And then we have the number that goes through the gate. The delta is what goes down Beach Walker.
And Casik.
and
Casik.
Casik as well. So the other point
Yeah,
that I
okay.
would
Yeah, I
interject.
don't think, I think you're right. I think we do have that number. You can fairly estimate, you want to take 10% off for Casik or whatever that number is. We can come up with a reasonable number of what's going down Beach Walker.
Okay.
The other thing I think about, Brad, is sorry, Councilman, is that if you're looking at impact and impact fees specifically, we probably wouldn't choose these dates for a baseline, because these dates are going to be high-traffic dates, probably. You'd probably choose October or April so that the impact would be more material versus the normal time, versus it's here, the impact might be more de minimis because of the high volume of traffic during these weeks.
But those are, especially the first two dates, are not the super high impact because it's after 4th of July and it's after Memorial Day.
But I would think summer's still going to be higher because of just
This is
tourists
gonna
in
be our,
general.
this is traditionally our highest. The other thing that I would add, just
Well,
for,
this was defined by the ARDA.
Correct.
These times, right?
and the reason why I kept these specific dates is so that we could be able to compare previous year to align. But the other thing that I wanted to mention, as you all know, the technology that's used is the pneumatic tubes. When they utilize the pneumatic tubes, we are also able to collect both volume, class, and speed data. And so we could extract that if the cost is concerned of just only doing the counts. But with the pneumatic tubes, the ability to collect class data, if that was important.
So
or-
if it's a
or-
four-passenger vehicle or a cement truck?
Correct.
Okay.
So I just wanted to let you guys
Like
know
the
that as
number
well.
of axles.
Axles.
I just want to make sure that by not collecting this data, we're going to be missing out on some information that might be important as we look at the Upper Beachwalker parcel development and what might impact that roadway.
So that was one of my points in saying if we were to amend and not do the full 9 locations, me recommending that we at least definitely do the Beachwalker components, because if those projects were to come online, based on the traffic last year, this time, the Cape was well underway. The Cape might be not, as far as construction, be completed. And so that would show a difference in numbers on Beachwalker, so that we can just have some comparative data to really understand what Beachwalker is absent of that particular project.
But that makes sense, but as I said before, we already have that baseline from last year on Beachwalker. We already have it.
So what would be the cost of two? Does the circle, is that pneumatic tubes? Do we capture the same kind of data that the pneumatic tubes would, John?
Repeat that one more time.
Would we does the sensors at the circle capture the same kind of data that the pneumatic tubes?
It's only calculating volumes. However, it's only calculating when it comes into the circle. So we would not get what those who may go into the circle to fresh fields that come out, we would miss those who. So hypothetically, the example that I always use is in the morning, a number of those contractors stop at fresh fields before they enter the island.
Yeah.
And so we would technically be missing out of those numbers, and if we're counting the traffic circle of those coming onto the island today.
So how much would two cost us?
If I am not mistaken, I believe it's around 700 per location.
It's 675.
So I'm wondering whether just one, somewhere along KIP, before or after, maybe after Old Cedar Lane. So you already know what's coming on, and then you figure out, you'll have some information about, how much going in and out of Cedar
Where's
Lane.
Old Cedar Lane?
That's
Cassie.
Thank you.
and then one on Beachwalker. And so we're also just capturing construction, traffic, vehicles, and things like that.
And as a reminder, if you guys decide not to vote, if you decide to deny it and John goes back and the cost comes at 3,000, and it just requires the mayor's signature. Doesn't even come back to Ways and Means.
I mean, it is a little time
So-
critical to make a decision now, because we want to have the 1st June timeframe. Because I think there is sense to use the same timeframe so that data points are comparable,
Yeah.
right? But what I'm hearing is that we want to have station number 3 and station number 7. That's it. Or station number 6. 6 probably, yes. 3 and 6, is that?
I would be comfortable with that.
Yeah, fairly modest cost, and
Okay. So then I would
Very
again
one-
like to withdraw my motion and bring forward a new motion.
Just
that we,
one, before your motion,
okay.
so you mentioned number 6, just know that would be after the general store, so
Yeah.
I don't know if that was.
Yes.
Okay, just
No,
make sure.
because we know that similar to what Stephanie just said about fresh fields, that
Got it.
people come in the morning, go to the general store, get their lunch or whatever, and then go back in.
Okay.
So we actually need to be after the general station, so that's why I would propose number 6.
okay.
Okay, so bringing forward a new motion that we are approving the current recommendation from John, but reduce it to only stations number 3 and stations number 6. Can I have a motion? Or,
I so move.
so, thank you.
Second.
Second? Any discussion about that idea?
And would your motion include the type of tubes it gave us class of vehicle?
Yeah, I would,
Yes.
if we are doing it, I would
Yes.
do
Yeah.
it because also of the traffic, construction kind of
Yes.
impact. I think we want to know what's a vehicle and what's a truck.
Yeah, that would be great.
Perfect. Okay, any more discussion? Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Moving on to new business E, review and recommendation to the town council for approval of the purchase of a UTV, utility task vehicle.
I want this in my own.
I used to have one on my farm, they were fun. Mine went fast.
Morning again, everybody.
Good morning.
So, just a quick bit of background. The Public Works Department, myself and Michael Nardelli, we do a lot of work on the road shoulders, and on the leisure trail, accessing the Parkway and Beachwalker Drive. And so we often find ourselves utilizing our trucks to get down and do that work. Given the nature of Beachwalker Drive and the Parkway, there's not a really great place to pull off, at least not typically in proximity of where we're going to be working. So oftentimes, we've got three options. We can impede traffic, we can pull off onto the landscaping, potentially damaging it, or we can pull onto the bike path, kind of half on, half off, which is certainly an obstruction to the bike path and the people using the leisure trails. We feel that a UTV would be really efficient for us to utilize to get from A to B if we're doing work on the Parkway. Again, this is going to be utilized for a lot of different tasks. Landscape inspections, leisure trail inspections. We can certainly do a lot of supplemental litter pickup when we see it on the Parkway and Beachwalker Drive. When we access our tidal station at the bridge, we can use the UTV to get up there. So I had in the budget for this year for $18,000 for a UTV that was approved in the budget. When we started looking, we were looking through some different options, and then we kind of started to explore in conjunction with the Go Green initiative, looking at electric UTV options, which is why that kind of came to a halt and redirect over to looking to electric UTV options, without having, we got the big name brands that are very, very expensive, and I would much rather buy a vehicle for that price than a UTV. But after doing some research, I came across a company that seems to be doing kind of an emergence in electric UTV and ATV options. It's a company called DRR USA. The price for it, pre-tax price for it is $18,999. So I'm asking the Ways and Means Committee if they would approve increasing my budget price from originally $18,000 to $22,000 to cover the estimated cost, the tax and fees and everything to get that over here. So I'm asking for an additional $4,000 on top of what was already budgeted for. And if this is approved, this will be funded through the general fund. So I would be happy to answer any questions about the usability or anything about purchasing a UTV.
Well, I'm certainly,
Thank you. Can I have a motion
so
to
moved.
approve?
Second.
Discussion. Questions?
Sure. Actually, mine's just more of a comment. I'm all for the UTV. My only comment, concern, question is with respect to an electric one, because we're only getting one UTV. Will the electric charge last the entire workday?
So the battery life on it is, it's got a 50-mile range. And again, this isn't, the intent for this is not to replace a vehicle, but for me to be more so when we need to do work that's gonna take us on a road shoulder or on the leisure trail. So it's not gonna be utilized in the same fashion that we use the gas trucks. However, it will take some stress off of the gas vehicles. When we're
Well,
doing that
I'm
work.
all for it, but
It can go from here to Ocean Park and back twice a day with one charge.
And a 50-mile range. 50 mile
So,
range,
and
that's
that's
right.
not what the vehicle is going to be used for. It's going to be used from here to Beachwalker Park and back, probably.
or maybe you could drive this all the way on the beach. I mean, this could be a vehicle.
And this one is a four-wheel drive vehicle, so it's certainly got the ability to be taken on the beach if needed.
just be noteworthy that if you're on the beach due to friction, you won't have that same range. It'll be shortened.
Okay.
So will council members be allowed to drive?
I would absolutely hand the keys over.
You would. Wrong answer. Brian,
So,
very wrong answer.
This is about having had one of these at my farm before. They can be a lot of fun. This is about twice as much as a gas one that you could get. Now, so if we're comfortable with, and I'm certainly fine with, if we're trying to go green and electric.
Yeah, and again, the original budget number was in there because I was intending on getting a gas UTV, but then, in nature of the Go Green initiative, we just thought it was a really good application to showcase that.
And what is really important here is that this would become a little bit of a showcase for all the other Ks.
And not only that, but, the idea of increasing kind of visibility in terms of town providing services. The head of Public Works and I had discussed this yesterday. Our landscape maintenance provider only basically comes on once a week, but occasionally there's trash twice a week, trash Wednesday and Friday, but there's occasionally trash that shows up on Kiawah Island Parkway, and it's difficult to deal with that from a town perspective with a truck, as you were alluding to, and this would make it easier for town staff to pick that stuff up kind of real-time basis each day.
So 2 questions. One, you guys, Michael and you will have kind of a fixed schedule where you take this vehicle out and do your thing every day or every second day, or not on Wednesdays and Fridays when the landscaping guys come in. So what is
Right,
your
we'll do it.
expected pattern of use?
So, yeah, first of all, it'll be certainly for incidentals, right? If we notice something, then we can get back here. I can call Mike or vice versa and say, hey, there's something on the parkway, there's an obstruction, something like that. We can jump out and do that. But similar to your question, we can certainly have a schedule that is on opposite days of when the landscapers are out there doing their litter control on the parkway. So we can have a pretty routine system to go travel the parkway.
I would recommend that because there are so many issues. It's not just trash, right? It's about the condition of the leisure trail, potholes, hanging branches, vegetation being ruined by a car that went off the road, et cetera. There are so many things that you guys need to come up with some kind of a schedule. Maybe it's, always at the end of the shift. At the end of the day, you do this, but I think we want to do this not only for on call.
Right.
If then
Yeah,
we wanna use this
absolutely. This is
vehicle,
going to make that aspect a lot more accessible for us
Yeah.
to be able to monitor and manage.
Mr. Chairman, it's a very good point. It's part of the discussion we had at the staff meeting yesterday, is that we're going to move towards more consistency and clarity about, when our staff, appropriate officials or personnel are going to be on the island, whether it's the traffic control officer, the code enforcement officers, or things like this. So there is kind of a consistent pattern of coverage and availability and visibility. It's been a little episodic heretofore, and you're absolutely right. We need to regularize that.
I just
And
have
second
one.
question. I'm sorry, I had a second
beg your
question.
pardon. You go for it.
So have we been able to talk to either existing owners of this brand or users of this brand, or is there anything out there on the web that would help us to understand that this is a really viable vehicle?
Yeah,
And reliable
I
vehicle.
looked up reviews of it. It was a company that's new to me. They're based out of Ohio. But I did look up reviews for a lot of different companies that I was unfamiliar with, which is what landed me here, because I saw a lot of bad reviews for electric vehicles. But this one had much better remarks on.
And there's a local distributor for this firm here?
Not a local in Charleston. No, so there is a shipping cost that's.
I'm more looking at maintenance. What happens
So
if the vehicle
we
breaks down?
can, there are companies in the Charleston area, specifically North Charleston, that does work on UTVs, and gas and electric UTVs. There's Velocity Power Sports in North Charleston that we could.
And what are they saying about this brand?
I don't know what Velocity Power Sports has said specifically about this brand, but I do know that they do a lot of work on electric UTVs.
So I have at least one final question for me. I couldn't find the answer as we were talking in our ordinance. Does our ordinance allow UTVs?
It doesn't.
Are we sure?
It's not,
I'm not sure, and I'm,
it doesn't prohibit them.
Yeah.
I
They're
mean, we've
used by
got
the
beach
resort.
patrol.
sorry?
The resort uses them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a maintenance vehicle.
Kika
And,
does.
and they're
Kika actually uses
SCDOT, because they go at least 30, so you can.
Yeah, and
drive
they've
them
got
around.
mirrors. I mean, so it's
have a
it's certainly
license
not a
plate?
prohibited
Okay,
vehicle.
I just wanted to make
Yeah,
sure we
and-
were not buying something that our ordinance says we can't have. That's.
Correct.
And Kika actually is now using these type of vehicles as well. Unfortunately, gasoline powered, but not battery.
No, I
But
just wanted to
they-
make sure
I
we
see
were
them a
not
lot.
violating.
I believe,
ordinance.
Kika regulations, I believe, I don't know about town ordinances, do prohibit these things generally. Now, whether we need to, whether we need to carve ourselves out or that from that, I'm not sure from safety and security and maintenance
Well,
standpoint.
and for what it's worth, there may be a very limited amount of times that this vehicle would go past the gate. You know, typically going to be on our property.
And it will have a license plate? So it is road registered?
These are registered vehicles.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So this vehicle would go both on roadways and on the leisure trails?
Ideally, yes, it can have, it does have the ability to do both.
It only drives 30, so it's probably safer if they are on the leisure trail.
So I see this as a bit of a demonstration vehicle, right? You're trying to demonstrate a need and a use. I think that makes total sense. My only concern is the electric versus gas. I'd love to make a statement, you know, do this electric, but the 50-mile range, and again, to Mr. Berner's point, the range on the beach is going to be a lot less. I would love to see us demonstrate this with gas and then maybe have more of them. And you could do a better name brand vehicle, local maintenance, local service, and then do more time and investigate which electrical version we might want to expand into. Because I can see us having several of these. The utility makes total sense to me. Just food for thought.
Thank you.
Well, again, the purpose is Kiowa Island Parkway, Beach Walker Drive, right? The beach is occasional or to try it out how it really works. But the key purpose, my understanding is, it's these two roadways, right? Which 50 miles range is not an issue.
I thought it was
I
four
would feel
places
more-
where a truck wouldn't go, which would be, on, you said bike paths and other leisure trails. So Kiowa Island Parkway, that's where a truck could go there.
Well, to access, when we need to pull off on the road, if there's an obstruction in the roadway, or if we're got litter pickup, or if we're meeting with, you know, somebody to look at the landscape or investigate issues with the leisure trail. We patched some potholes on the leisure trail a few months ago, and it would have been very helpful to use a UTV to park on the leisure trail so that we can, you know, make those repairs. It's not going to be, again, it's not to replace fully a truck, but just to make these responsibilities a little more accessible and less intrusive to motorists and peds using the leisure
And
trail.
more safe,
And safer.
right? Because if you have to do these controls with the current trucks on the parkway and you have to stop, you will never be off the road, and your cab door will actually open to the traffic. So from a safety point of view, I think there's no question, you know, that an UTV is helpful for that particular purpose. I would still think it's a great example for us to test this technology. I would just like to ask you to go back to some of these UTV dealers in the Charleston area to make really sure, A, what is their recommendation for an electric vehicle UTV? And B, which brands they really service. I've never heard about the company, but that doesn't mean anything, right? I just want to make sure we are not buying DRR and then find, you know, only a dealer that's willing to maintain them, you know, 50 miles from here.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to call
So
local.
I would be okay to approve this, but under these two conditions.
Absolutely.
Polaris makes, which is a more well-known name, but they're the one comparable cost, or a little bit lower cost, only has a 15-mile battery range. Their higher cost one is about 30,000 or more for a similar range, but I think those are valid.
Yeah,
things.
Polaris, Honda, John Deere, those big names. And when I was doing my research, either they were out of stock or they were going to be the price of a vehicle. And I think that we don't need to spend that much money, maybe not on the first one that we're.
I assume, what, do we know what kind of warranty these are under?
It's on their website. There is a warranty for these UTVs, but I can bring that back to the council this afternoon and have that information for you.
Okay, are we having more topics to discuss, more questions? Are we ready to vote? Everybody in
Think so.
favor under these two conditions that I mentioned?
Aye.
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 Abstain?
Okay,
Thank you all.
thank you, Brian. Last topic under new business, review and recommendation to the town council for approval for funding of the charitable grant application from Habitat for Humanity. Stefan?
Easy. So members of, Mr. Chair, members of Ways and Means, as you recall, so the town, just for new members, Luke, Councilmember Farrell, council does, it's called charitable contributions, and we typically council gives they budget about $200,000 a year. At least we've been doing this for the last 9 years that I've been here. And the money is dispersed out to grantees in the Sea Islands or that support Sea Islands. They can be in the Charleston area, but support Sea Islands. In the last couple of years, it's been kind of our mission and goal has been categorized to 3 categories, which is housing, hunger, and health. Those are the 3 focus areas historically. It used to just be an open grant, and council would just essentially fund as they see appropriate, but it's still kind of targeted towards those, and maybe added arts in there and education in there. But it's been drilled down to those 3. So this year, it was no different. We received applications. They were due in January. We have staff that essentially vets the applications, and then they come and present their recommendations to Ways and Means and Council. We have members of those various organizations here to answer any questions. As you'll see, or I guess you don't have the actual full list, everything was funded out, really great organizations. All the money, I think with the exception of maybe $3,000 or a very small amount, was left over. Unfortunately, after the approval of the grantees' proposals, Ms. Reynolds, Petra Reynolds, was notified. She collects all the applications. She was notified, or she was asked by a board member, Habitat for Humanity. They normally submit applications to us. They are normally a regular. Asked why they were not awarded, and of course, that's when we found out that their application was never presented because, unfortunately, the town's email, for whatever reason, quarantined, and it was never reached. Ms. Reynolds never knew that it was sitting in a quarantine folder until it was brought to her attention by Habitat. Once I determined that, we did some research just to make sure that, yes, in fact, they submitted. They did. I believe had the information. They did meet our deadline. It was just unfortunate that our email system essentially spammed it and put it in quarantine without our knowledge. They did not reach out to us to confirm that we received it. Granted, they did not do that. We did not find out until afterwards. So before you today is discussion and consideration if you'd be willing to essentially increase the charitable contribution budget to either fully fund them a portion, or not this year, but maybe, consider as normal next year if they decide to apply again. I think in their request that they had requested was $20,000, and You have actually their application before you. What I don't think we include is we do actually have the email showing that they did meet the deadline when they submitted. Any questions for me with regards to this kind of
Can I first have a
unusual
motion-
process?
Can I
That's
first
what-
have a motion to approve the recommendation?
So move.
Second.
Discussion. Questions for Stefan? So we don't have this budgeted, so we would have a first only, $20,000, grant beyond budget. Yes.
So as somebody who has participated in Women Build, so I've given my sweat to this kind of a project and done community service over at the store, I fully support this.
Yeah, I do too.
Any questions, comments? No? All right. Are we comfortable to vote? Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That concludes Chapter 7, New Business. Number 8, Chairman's Report. I don't have anything to add. The Rhoda Treasurer's Report under tab number 8. Status by the end of March.
That's correct. Yes, so I have 3 quarters of our performance, and as of end of March, we have about $38 million in the fund balance. Of this amount, about 55% or 21 is in the general fund, and 8.4 is reserve. 8.7 million is for tourism related, and 8.4 is for capital projects, future capital projects or emergency fund. Overall, our revenues were about 11.2 million, and this is 12% or 1.4 million higher than compared to year-to-date last year, and about 72% of our total budgeted revenues. So the majority of our revenues are within the budget, and as you recall, we amended the budget in January to reflect for more realistic projections, and we amended our building permit revenues and interest revenues to reflect for increases in both. So I'm expecting that our revenues are going to be within that budget. And the only other item is in miscellaneous. We just got this one-time reimbursement from CCSO for the book value of the equipment that the deputies were using. On the expenditure side, we are at about 7.6 million. This is 4% or 296 higher than last year to date, and accounts for about 45% of the current budget. That 45% is skewed a little bit because we have that 5 million placeholder that is skewing that number. But I'm projecting that the expenditures are going to be within the amended budget, with the exception of professional fees, legal fees are going to be higher. And we had cleaning costs after the storm in December that was not budgeted. But the rest looks pretty much within the budget. Any questions?
Dorota, we are still, this is by the end of March.
Yes.
So we still have the whole April of income stream related to business licenses.
That's correct.
So now you have concluded that period. Do you have any numbers to share with us?
Yes, so
Even if it's preliminary?
we just finished the renewal process. We collected 2.9 million in business license revenue. So right now we at 3 million.
Okay, so we are
Total.
almost on target.
That's correct. We will be within that budget. And we have another big stream coming up in June that is collected through municipal association, that is business licenses for insurance. So that's another 400,000 that will come in in June.
But that's a separate budget item, or is
No,
that in the 3 million?
because it's also business license, it's just not collected by us.
So that means we are, as of now, expected by the end of June to be $300,000 over budget as it relates to business license income. Is that correct?
Possibly,
Okay.
yes.
Just, okay, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Dorota? All right, thank you. Next, agenda item, citizen comments. Anybody that wants to speak? Look like it. Committee members' comments. Brett?
No, sir.
Madeline? Russ?
No, thank you.
Luke?
I just would say thank you to the council for your patience and letting me ask so many questions today.
All right,
Thank you.
great. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
Thank you very much.